Hi everyone. So now we're moving on from the muscles onto the nervous system. We're going to talk about the two different divisions of the nervous system. We're going to have further lectures on the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system later. Today we're just doing a generalized overview. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the structure of the neurons, all of those different neuroglia, which are the supporting cells and what function they play, and then a little bit of talking about the nerve structure. When we get to the nerves, make sure you're channeling what happened in the muscles because there's a lot of similarities on how things are named. Okay, so let's start off with the two divisions of the nervous system. So all of the structures of the nervous system are classified into one of two divisions, two parts. The first is the central nervous system. That includes the brain and the spinal cord. And then the second one is the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral as in like off to the side. So if you think of like your peripheral vision, peripheral means just everything on the side. Those include things like the nerves and then another structure that we're going to learn about, which are ganglia. Okay, so let's talk generally about what the general function of the nervous system is. Most of us think, oh, well, brain, it's for thinking, but we forget that it plays a very important role in connecting us with the environment and monitoring the environment. So it has sensory input, bringing information towards the central nervous system. And then we also need to respond or react to that. Those are called motor responses or motor commands that just brings information away from the central nervous system towards what are called effector cells. Those are things like muscles or glands to cause some sort of change or reaction in the cell. So we bring information in, we process it, we think about it, we integrate it with information that we already know, and then we send out some sort of response. So sensory in, motor information out. When you look at the nervous system, we've seen this slide already. There are two different generalized cell populations. We have the neurons. The neurons are the ones that create electrical signals to communicate within the cell and command things to do things. Then we have the support staff, and those are called neuroglia. So neuroglia are the other types of cells that are part of the nervous system that are not able to create any electrical signals. They just help and support the neuron. Today we're going to look at some of the more specific examples of neuroglia. Let's look at this neuron structure. So here we have in purple here, this is called the cell body, and the cell body contains the nucleus. The nucleus is where the DNA would be stored. Coming off of the cell body, you have shorter processes, which are called dendrites. Dendrites are in blue here. Then you have one longer process here. This is called the axon. So generally, dendrites receive information from other cells or sometimes sensory information, and then the axons are going to send that information from one part of the body to another part of the body. So later we're going to look at how those axons are going to create nerves, and so you can really think about how you can move information for long, long distances along the axon. So dendrites receive, these are the shorter processes coming up of the cell body, and then the axons send information, so they're generally longer and more dominant. The very initial part of the axon is called the axon hillock. So if you think about this sort of triangular shaped region right here, that's the axon hillock. This is the axon, and then the very ends, the little round ends of the axon are called axon terminals. Terminal as in terminate as in the ends. Now the neurons, because they are so modified, specialized structure, they also have some other structures that you'll need to know, which is the neurolemma. So neurolemma refers to the cell membrane, the outer membrane of the cell. If you remember back to muscle fibers, which are the muscle cells, those are called sarcolemma. So it's the same type of naming scheme. So those are the sarcolemma. So now we have the neurolemma. So the neurolemma just is the outermost cell membrane. And then Oh, that's all we had. We already did axon hillock. Good. Okay, so axon hillock, just the very first part of the axon, the fat part at the beginning. Okay, so let's try to review. So what I would like to encourage you to do right now is to go ahead and press pause and pause it, and then go ahead and see if you can do this. So I'm going to give you a second to do that. Okay, so here we have the shorter processes, or shorter little things that stick out off of the cell body. Those are called the dendrites. And this region right here, the whole part, the batter part right there would be the cell body, also known as neurosoma. If you want to use that term, that's fine with me. And then this little structure that's found inside of the cell body, that would be the nucleus. Now, if this initial part right here, the fat part, see, kind of cone-shaped is usually how they describe that. That's called the axon hillock. So if this is the axon hillock, this must be the axon. And then the very, very ends of the axons are called axon terminals. Okay, so remember, dendrites are short and the axons are longer because they're for sending information away. So let's look at where the neurons are found in the central nervous system. So when we think about the different regions of the neuron, we have the cell body, and the axons are going to be found in different places. The gray matter, which is called gray matter because it literally looks gray. So if you've heard of that phrase like gray matter, when you look at the central nervous system, and especially the brain, you'll notice that there's two different colors here. There's two different tissue types. This outer part right here, this is called the gray matter. And this whiter part right here, this is called the white matter. Now the cell bodies, which again would be this region right here, cell bodies and the dendrites, those are going to be located in the gray matter because that is where you see cell-to-cell connections. So one cell connecting with another neuron. Whereas the white matter, the reason that it is white is because it is myelinated, and we're going to talk about what that means later. But that myelination gives it a whiter color, and those are going to be where the axons are. Okay, so cell bodies, which is again this region right here, those are going to be found in the gray matter of the central nervous system, and the axons, which is these regions right here, these are going to be found in the white matter of the central nervous system. Now looking at the peripheral nervous system, the two different structures of the peripheral nervous system are nerves, which most of us have heard of, and then ganglia, or ganglion if it's singular. What ganglia are collections, little groups, little clusters of cell bodies found within the peripheral nervous system. So for example, if we're looking at this picture right here, here is the spinal cord. The spinal cord would be part of the central nervous system. There's the gray matter with the cell bodies. There's the white matter with the axons. But if you look outside of that, off to the side or in the periphery, that's when you're going to see this cluster right here, and this cluster is called the dorsal root ganglion, and that's an example of a ganglion that includes a collection of the cell bodies in the peripheral nervous system. Now, coming off of the ganglion, you'll see nerves, and you can see all of the nerves in this picture here, the things that look a little bit like cords or maybe like really thick dental floss. Those are nerves, and what those are bundled axons in the peripheral nervous system. So let's look at the structure of nerves. So remember, nerves do not contain cell bodies, they only contain the axons. So what happens is all of the axons that are running in a particular location, they're going to be bundled up, and they're bundled up and surrounded by connective tissue layers. Okay, so channeling back to the to the muscle lecture, what was the function of those connective tissue layers? Right, so there's two parts here. So one is to simply protect them. You want to make sure that these very delicate long cell extensions are protected. But another thing is to keep them nice and straight and organized. So make sure that they reach their destination without getting all tangled up with one another. Okay, so you're going to organize and protect them by surrounding them with connective tissue layers. Okay, so again, channeling back to your muscle lecture, let's go through the different connective tissue layers. In this picture here is one single axon. So we have a neuron sending out an axon to take information somewhere else. I like to think of them as wires, sort of connecting and sending information from one place to another. So here we have our axon. So there's the myelin sheath, we'll come back to that, but wrapping around the axon of one single axon, that would be the endoneurium. Remember, endo means inside, neurium means nerve, so inside the nerve. Okay, so again, channeling back, so if you take a bunch of axons and bundle them into a group, they create fascicles. And so what is surrounding one single fascicle? That would be a perineurium, peri meaning around the outside. Okay. Okay, so around one fascicle would be the perineurium. And then if you take a collection of fascicles, sorry, I can't pause it, I'm almost done. Around a collection of fascicles would be one full nerve, and that would be the there's my son here, shh, be quiet. That would be the epineurium. Remember, epi means around. So endo is inside, peri is around, and then epi is the outermost around a full fascicle. So hopefully at this point this feels very familiar because it's exactly the same naming scheme as we already saw in the muscles. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop and I'll continue on later.